Hey folks, we are back. How y'all doing lately? Me personally, I'm doing well. I'm doing pretty good. The job's going well, the white hole and all. I will say that I'm a little concerned about a recent turn of events. I don't know if this is an issue or just something that is normal that happens in outer space, but I think I think I have a pest of some sort. Every once in a while, my can of Uncle ZX 473's Grade C nutrient slurry for organics is not on the counter where it's supposed to be every time, during my meal breaks. It's actually torn open and scratched up, some scratches, some light scratches, maybe some light bite marks, teeth that can somehow bite through metal like it was paper. That's pretty crazy. And I've been finding them on my floor. Something's eating them. But it's cool. It's cool. I'm working on a solution to this problem. I've laid out traps, laser traps. I'm sure it's just something like a space rat. I don't know how it could have gotten in here because I'm out in the cold vacuum of space. Where did it come from? But it's okay. It's fine. I'm dealing with it anyway. Let's move on from that. Let's move on to the review. The review. The classic Doctor Who story review, Genesis of the Daleks. This just so happens to be one of my all-time favorite stories. And it's also generally regarded as an all-time classic. It delivers on multiple fronts, not only giving us a harrowing tale of survival for our heroes, but also one of the best, most biting, and most meaningful social commentaries Doctor Who has ever produced. It also features one of the most iconic villains Doctor Who has ever created. This story is also great because it gives the Doctor a true moral dilemma to grapple with, presenting the Doctor, and by extension we the viewers, with a philosophical thought experiment that is still debated to this day. This story also features the most iconic villains in Doctor Who history, the nefarious pepperpots themselves, the Daleks. It provides them with a worthy origin story that crystallizes the essence of their characterization as genocidal fascists, written by none other than their original creator, Terry Nation. But before we go any further, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the vibes, if you're enjoying the energy and the je ne sais quoi of this channel, then please like, subscribe, ring the bell, hit the thumb, do the thing. I would really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Anyway, on with the review. Terry Nation was initially commissioned to write this story by the old guard, so to speak, of outgoing producer Barry Letts and script editor Terrence Dix, before it was handed off to the new crew of Philip Hinchcliffe and Robert Holmes. Initially, Nation submitted a script that, while decent, was described by Barry Letts as the same script he's already sold us twice. So they sat down with Nation and brainstormed for a bit, until Barry Letts came up with the idea of writing an origin story for the Daleks, a genesis of the Daleks, as he put it. Nation took Letts' description as the title for his new story and dove in, and thus, a Doctor Who classic was born. Philip Hinchcliffe wasn't crazy about including old baddies like the Daleks and the Cybermen in his season, wanting to push the envelope into new territory more. However, he was fully aware that bringing in old beloved villains would definitely help the ratings. So he buckled down and tried to see how him and new script editor Robert Holmes could make it their own. Robert Holmes was an old hand on the show at this point, having written several all-time classics for the show throughout its run, and he'd always had a predilection towards the horror and the macabre, always trying to see how far he could push the scripts. He was often reeled in by Terrence Dix, who didn't want to upset the parents too much, but Hinchcliffe seems to have been of a like mind to Holmes, wanting the show to be more gritty and grounded. And so Genesis of the Daleks became a much darker, moodier, more violent piece than it might have been under the previous regime, much to its advantage, I think. By providing the Daleks with an origin story, Nation is able to make the strongest and most overt parallels to their inspiration, the Nazis. Through this wartime setting and socio-military lens, Nation is able to dig deep into the true rationale behind the amoral leaders of such movements, laying bare the truth that these supposed great leaders are really interested in nothing more than their own insatiable lust for power and control, at the cost of everything and everyone around them, even the destruction of their own society. This hunger for power itself is also shown to be the byproduct of a severe inferiority complex, to the point that Davros hungers to kill literally every other living being in the universe, just to feel like he's in some way winning.
The only living thing, a microscopic organism, reigning supreme.
The production crew does an excellent job with its mix of interior and exterior sets, effectively creating a desolate, war-ravaged world on the brink of collapse. The lighting is dramatic and moody, giving the story an almost film noir look at times. The Daleks in particular benefit greatly from this lighting setup, emerging from the shadows or skulking around trenches, silhouetted in front of a purple sky, achieving a far more sinister and menacing presence than some of their more brightly lit appearances in past stories. Fog is used effectively to blend shots from real locations to built sets, and the entire story has an authentic wartime feel to it, overtly evoking imagery of World War II trenches, gas masks, landmines, tripwires, and roving bands of bedraggled soldiers touting machine guns emerging out of the mist, all set the gritty authenticity of the deadly battlefield our heroes have been dropped into. The first several shots of the first episode are haunting, showing a band of gas-masked soldiers prowling the desolate war-torn landscape, before a sudden burst of gunfire cuts them down in dramatic slow motion. The scenes feel fairly real, and evoke the sense that you're watching a more mature, realistic story than perhaps other lighter romps of the past. Although this episode does use the often repeated rocky quarry as a setting, it's used extremely effectively here, emphasizing the desolation of the scorched, war-ravaged planet. The Doctor emerges out of the fog, clearly in a dangerous environment right off the bat. He's then confronted by a Time Lord, who explains why the Doctor is here and sets the plot in motion. This is a cool moment, as it's the first appearance of the Time Lord since way back in John Pertwee's story, The Three Doctors. In that story, the Time Lords were forced to enlist the help of not just one Doctor, but three from different points in his timeline in order to defeat the mad ancient Time Lord Omega. Upon successfully defeating him, thus saving the entire universe from destruction, the Time Lords rewarded him by returning his knowledge and ability to fly the TARDIS, thus ending his forced exile on Earth. The Time Lords were used very sparingly in the classic era of Doctor Who, only appearing a handful of times during particularly meaningful events. The showrunners knew it was important to keep the Doctor's origin shrouded in mystery as much as possible, so that when Time Lords did show up, they retained that aura of ancient, all-powerful alien beings with mastery over time and space beyond our comprehension. This appearance both nicely ties into the past story, directly referencing it and deepening the continuity and lore of the series, as well as telegraphing to the viewers that this will be a particularly important and consequential adventure. In this regard, they were spot on. The Doctor is initially annoyed by this interference, but the Time Lord knows exactly how to hook the Doctor's interest, his insatiable curiosity and fascination with the Daleks.
I won't do it. Whatever it is, I refuse. Daleks. Daleks. Tell me more.
The story has a unique vibe to it right from the start, helping it stand out from the other hundreds of Who stories. Unlike most Who stories, where the Doctor shows up, stumbles upon a fairly black and white problem, and does his best to fix it, in this story, the Doctor is given an intriguing and specific mission right off the bat, with moral implications, to somehow divert or alter the course of history to prevent the Daleks from destroying all life in the universe in the distant future. He can either somehow influence and alter their development, learn a crucial weakness to be used against them, or destroy them completely. This gives the story a slightly more sophisticated flavor, as the Doctor has to go into full-on spy mode. He has to feel his way through a dangerous world of political and military turmoil, full of various figures in positions of power, secretly plotting against one another, trying to figure out on the fly who he can trust and who will gun him down without a second thought. This is a brutal, unforgiving world, populated by people who work in the realm of survival and grim practicality. The good or bad of it all rarely entering the equation. In typical Time Lord fashion, they ask the Doctor for help, and then leave him in the worst possible position to actually help them, dumping him and his friends into not only an active war zone, but the middle of a minefield. The Doctor and friends are bombarded with explosives almost immediately, utilizing some scarily real-looking explosions all around our poor actors. I honestly can't tell if Tom Baker's expression post-explosions is great acting, or just the actor authentically shaken up by the bombs wired by an underpaid and overworked pyrotechnics department going off right next to his head. The next scare comes from the Doctor stepping on a landmine. This scene is tense and effective, as Harry gallantly refuses to abandon the Doctor, even after his insistence, instead helping to stabilize the mine with rocks, so the Doctor can step off of it more safely. The Doctor's grin and genuine thanks to Harry help cement their friendship, and is a nice moment. If you've watched the newest season of Doctor Who, then I'm sure you see the parallels between this scene and the story Boom. It's pretty clear that the writer of that story, Stephen Moffat, was inspired by this scene, right down to the companion disobeying the Doctor's orders to back off in order to increase his chance of survival, and spun a whole episode out of this one scene. Quality results, I might add. It's a good one. Go check it out. The story starts incredibly strong, piling one realistic danger on top of the next in increasingly dramatic fashion, and climaxing with a harrowing scene involving a gas attack, a desperate scramble for gas masks, an attack by a band of soldiers, and finally ending with a hail of machine gun fire from a second group of soldiers. The first episode of the six-parter just really pulled me in from the word go, and then continued its excellent streak of well-written and engrossing scenes right up to the cliffhanger. The Doctor and Harry are captured and brought to the Khalid base. Sarah's overlooked, presumed dead by the soldiers, and begins her dangerous trek across the craggy surface of the planet. The uniforms immediately and very intentionally evoke the sharp, sinister uniforms of the Nazis, and the lapels specifically reference the lightning bolts of the SS or Schutzstaffel, the Nazis' paramilitary ranks. Black was a popular color for fascists during the war, being adopted by both the German and Italian movements. The dark colors and tailored cut were intentionally meant to project an aura of authority and fear.
Hans, are we the baddies?
We can see that reference here with the Khalid uniform. Instead of two lightning bolts, we have one lightning bolt with an eye intersecting its center. This can be read as both a reference to the power of science and Davros' solo electronic eye he sports on his forehead, as well as foreshadowing of his creation, the cycloptic Daleks and their death rays. You could also read it as the Big Brother-esque eye of Davros, always watching, always in control of this dystopian 1984-esque bunker he lords over with an iron fist. The scene between the Doctor and this shrill young general is pure gold in my opinion. The back and forth between the Doctor and this zealous young Khalid commander is both hilarious and depressingly relevant. The young man has clearly been indoctrinated into a delusional belief system of his own race's superiority, born from a lifetime of being fed propaganda and hatred from his superiors. Sadly, it reminds me a lot of a certain group of young people today. Indoctrinated from a young age with the hateful slop they're fed by their own misguided parents, or by influencers they discover on the internet.
What does a fascist mean?
This is clearly a byproduct of their endless war with the fouls, an echo of how the German people post-World War I hungered for a sense of power and control after the losses they experienced. A feeling of power that the fascist hate-monger Hitler was more than happy to deliver through his strongman persona, eugenics myths, and scapegoating of the Jewish people and other races and ethnicities. The young General Raven whips himself into a Hitler-like frenzy almost immediately, clearly taken aback by the Doctor's demure and clearly unimpressed reactions.
We'll wipe the Thals from the face of Skaro.
Yes, I've heard that before.
What?
I was just wondering how you propose to wipe the Thals in the face of Skara with boy soldiers, no ammunition, and very young generals.
The more the man screams, the more disinterested the Doctor seems to become. He's clearly seen this shit before, and is not the least bit intimidated by this sad little boy soldier, barking at him like a scared chihuahua. I love watching Tom Baker casually dismantle this puffed up child, effortlessly whipping the man into a distracted frenzy before casually disarming him and taking control of the situation.
Our battle cry will be total extermination of the Thals!
That's very impressive. You mean you're going to sweep these wastelands absolutely?
This is a cathartic moment that I imagine played especially well in the 70s, a mere few decades after the events of World War II. Harry gets a cool line in here too, showing off just how suave he can be when given the opportunity.
How interesting. Are you fit, Harry?
I felt fitter, Doctor.
Good.
Sarah wanders across the war zone, escaping some shadowy figures before stumbling upon what appears to be a weapons test of some sort. Here we get the very first look at a character who would grow to be a Doctor Who icon, the creator of the Daleks himself, Davros. His introduction is perfect. First we see him sitting stock still, cloaked in shadows. He almost looks like he could be dead, his face and hands withered and green, his eyes scarred shut, sitting motionless, the bottom half of him looking eerily familiar. Then, a twitch of his claw-like hand as he flicks a switch, and he begins to speak, his voice eerily similar to a Dalek's. The camera whips over to reveal a Dalek. We see laser blasts eviscerate a group of targets, much to the pleasure of this mysterious new figure, who purrs his approval.
The weaponry is perfect.
This is the perfect first episode to kick off this epic 6-part quest. Davros is one of the coolest villains Doctor Who has ever created, and I love his design. It perfectly encapsulates everything he represents, as well as being rich with details that not only broadcast his personality, but also visually tells the backstory of his character. The costuming and prosthetics are truly impressive, completely encasing the actor in a latex head, save for his mouth and lower jaw, which are expertly blended together with makeup. His single gnarled hand, glowing electronic eye, and various switches and knobs on his travel vehicle's dashboard complete the look. This costume would hold up in a modern era episode, and is proven by just how similar he looks in his modern era appearances. Well, most of them. Davros is a genius scientist, born into a world cursed with endless war. Not only that, but his race is obsessed with keeping their race pure, expunging anyone who shows any sign of genetic mutation. However, Davros himself is clearly the victim of such an affliction, so it seems as if the Khalid Society made an exception for Davros, probably because of the enormous benefits his scientific genius brought to their war efforts. He is apparently determined that mutation is in fact an inevitable outcome for his race, and thus is working on escalating that mutation, bringing them to their final form ahead of time so as to better prepare for this eventual inevitability. Evidently blind, he's installed a single bionic eye in his forehead in order to see. His lower half, his transport vehicle, is obviously based off the Dalek design, but in this context it is clear that this is the signature look of Davros' technology. You can see that he wishes to view himself as superior, and thus built machines in his image, but stronger, sturdier, and more invulnerable. As a megalomaniac with no empathy or conscience, he views such emotions as an affliction, to be eliminated from his Daleks' personalities. Michael Wisher is chilling and iconic in the role, switching between calm, precise musings and false camaraderie to Hitler-esque eruptions of screamed dictatorial commands and megalomaniacal rants.
You have seen my Daleks in battle?
Many times.
What mistakes do they make? You will tell me?
No.
You will tell me?
No, I will not!
But he's so much more than just a shouty, evil for evil's sake villain. Going toe-to-toe with the Doctor as they philosophically debate morality and the concepts of good versus evil, cooperation versus survival at all costs.
They are totally evil.
Evil? No! No, I will not accept that. They are conditioned simply to survive. They can survive only by becoming the dominant species. When all other life forms are suppressed, when the Daleks are the supreme rulers of the universe, then you will have peace.
He's as wrong-headed as a person can get, but his origins and logic make his twisted motivations tragically understandable. He is unquestionably the man who created the Daleks, and delivers a pitch-perfect performance that fully brings the character to life. There are a handful of actors who've portrayed Davros after Wisher's untimely death. Some of them, such as modern-era Julian Bleach, giving quality performances, but Michael Wisher will always hold the honor of perfecting the character and bringing him to life in what I would argue is the definitive and best Davros story. Fun fact, in order to prepare himself for the role, Wisher, knowing he wouldn't be able to see or hear very well once he was in full makeup on set, decided to perform rehearsals with a paper bag over his head, much to the amusement of Tom Baker and the rest of the cast. It seems to have done the trick, however, as Wisher delivers a strong and memorable performance, in spite of being almost completely encased in props and prosthetics. Aside from the amazing performance of Michael Wisher as Davros, there's also the slimy, snake-like performance of Davros' right-hand man and all-around toady, Niter, played by Peter Miles. Miles is excellent in making the viewer hate him and the racist, sociopathic Khalid elites.
We must keep the Khalid race pure. Imperfects are rejected.
That's a very harsh policy. It's horrible.
Your views are not important.
Niter is a textbook example of the amoral underlings that latch onto strongman dictators due to the allure of power they exude. They think if they just do everything this powerful figure says, no matter how vile, then they too will be powerful. Niter is a completely sycophantic underling to Davros, carrying out his orders and secretly backstabbing his fellow Khalids left and right in order to keep his boss in power. He's basically Davros' Gestapo.
Who can you count on?
Carvel, Frenton, Pardon. But there'll be more soon, I'm sure of it.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to know.
He barely even bats an eyelid when Davros reveals his plan to help the Thals kill the entirety of their own race, minus the scientists and soldiers of his research bunker.
The whole of the Khalid people. You would go that far?
Did you ever doubt it?
No.
He is clearly completely enamored by the level of power and control Davros holds over the Khaleds, a representative of the shallow, heartless Nazis second-in-commands who kowtowed to Hitler's whims no matter how ghastly and genocidal they became. He stays loyal to Davros to the bitter end, getting caught completely off guard and ironically murdered by the very creatures he helped his boss to empower. A fitting end for such a despicable worm of a man. Other noteworthy performances include James Garbutt as the ill-fated scientist Ronson, Dennis Chinnery as the short-lived Khaled rebel leader Garment, Stephen Yardley as the Muto Severin, and of course, the voice of Roy Skelton as the Daleks.
We will emerge and take our rightful place as the supreme power of the universe!
Everyone in this cast does a great job embodying their roles, and there isn't a weak link among them. We learn that there's a third faction of people on Skaro, the Mutos, who are genetically mutated people that have been heartlessly rejected by the Khaleds and forced to live out in the harsh wilds of the planet in order to keep the race pure. Once again, an overt reference to the Nazis and their heartless rejection of the physically and mentally disabled communities and a wrong-headed obsession with keeping their own race pure. Speaking of the Mutos, Sarah encounters a group of them on the surface of the planet, and we're introduced to the kind-hearted and thoughtful Severin, immediately establishing the Mutos as a sympathetic group, victims of this dehumanizing war, rather than the two-dimensional monsters that Snyder painted them as. Severin and Sarah are taken prisoner by the Thals, generating an intriguing B-plot where they're used as forced labor in order to build a rocket for the Thals to attack the Khaleds. This story once again effectively utilizes Sarah as the heart of the TARDIS crew, as she forms a bond with Severin and the other prisoners, as well as bringing back the feisty rabble-rouser version of Sarah Jane that I like to see, as she immediately begins plotting an escape with her fellow prisoners. The fact that they'll all die from radiation poisoning if they don't escape adds an effective ticking clock to the proceedings, although that unfortunately doesn't quite get paid off in the end, as they somehow manage to complete their task without dying in spite of the earlier warnings. I will admit, the middle of the story does sag a little bit, and I can envision a tighter, more well-paced version of the story that's only 4 parts rather than 6. You could easily jettison the majority of the TARDIS team's trips through the caves and encounters with Davros' rather silly-looking clam monsters. There is actually an edited-down omnibus version of the story that I had the privilege of seeing in the theater a couple of years ago, and while that viewing experience was a bit zippier and fun to watch, it unfortunately cut a couple of very meaningful scenes as well as the fat, so I can't really recommend it. Besides, in the end, it's not like any of these superfluous scenes are outright bad or anything. They're still enjoyable enough to watch and don't bog down the story too much. For example, the edited version cuts out this scene, which I find to be a crucial moment of world building, as well as just being a riveting moment of horror.
Oh, give me a hand. Come on! I should just slacken my grip. They say people who fall from great heights are dead before they hit the ground. I don't believe that, do you?
This scene emphasizes the ugliness and cruelty present on the Thal side of the war as well, showing that the good versus evil battle lines aren't so neat and clear-cut in this story. The Thals are using people as slave labor, planning to kill them in the end, and can also be cruel to them while doing it. It shows how deep the rot has grown on both sides of this 1,000-year war. The story actually does a very good job of showcasing the nuance and complexity of war, how there can be both good and bad people on either side of a conflict. There are several instances of both the Thals and the Khaleds being shown in the worst and best light at different times, or simply being a shade of gray, a pawn in a larger game they have no control over. We witness soldiers on both sides commit cruel, evil acts. It's true, but we also see Khaled scientists bemoaning the removal of morality from the Daleks' design. We see the Thal leader blow up an entire civilization, then have a change of heart in real time, going from a leader who just ordered the deaths of thousands of people to a man who now preaches forgiveness and second chances. He made a hard and enormously consequential decision to end a war, but he's clearly not a megalomaniac like Davros.
There must be a victory parade, and as for him, he must be punished. Let us now show that whilst we were ruthless in war, we are generous in victory. Let all prisoners be freed, charges against them dropped. Issue that statement at once.
We witness a Muto who wants to kill all who are different from him, and a Muto who shows compassion, bravery, and leadership qualities, eventually becoming a leader of sorts to his own people and forming an alliance with the Thals to take on the Daleks. We even see the screamy boy general Raven betraying Davros by siding with the Khaled civilians concerned with the Dalek project. He's still screamy and zealous, but there's clearly a bit more going on to him under the surface than the initial impression would suggest.
Only a matter of months ago, Davros perfected a new substance which has the strength of 30-foot thick reinforced concrete.
Never mind about that. Could you help us to find Sarah?
One of my agents could lead you into the service shaft underneath the Thal City, but after that you're strictly on your own.
However, the Thals are portrayed as less overtly evil and racist than the Khalids overall, which is an appropriate balance, I think. Both sides have good and bad people on them, but only one side is ruled by Nazis, so there's still more evil more often. Quick shout out to this character, who shows up about midway through the story, when the Doctor believes that Sarah and Harry were killed in the missile attack. First of all, great haircut. She's giving me kind of a Rosemary's Baby vibe, but in a good way. This is Betten, played by Harriet Philpin. Her appearance is initially used to help trick the viewers into thinking that Sarah might actually be dead, and this will be the replacement companion going forward. This exact same trick is used in Christopher Eccleston's two-part finale, Bad Wolf / The Parting of Ways, when he believes Rose to be dead and simultaneously befriends another young, plucky woman who aids him in fighting the Daleks. Once it's discovered that Sarah and Harry are still alive, she's pivoted into the role of being the face of the resistance to the new Dalek threat. I like her assertiveness and no-nonsense attitude, while still being kind and reasonable. The respectful alliance she forms with Severin, and willingness to wait and give the Doctor and friends some time to escape before blowing the tunnel suggests that she will be a capable leader of the emerging post-war society. Having this role be represented by a fresh-faced young woman feels right, as she represents both youth and progress, a ray of hope for the future at the end of a dark and violent story. I like how the story is both jam-packed with exciting action sequences and shows several figures trying to solve the problem diplomatically or politically, much to the Doctor's encouragement. It mirrors how reasonable, democratically minded people attempt to resolve issues non-violently first, only turning to violence and force when all other avenues are exhausted. It also shows how a narcissistic lunatic with no true allegiances to anyone but himself, like Davros, can easily ruin any such plans for a peaceful solution by playing both sides against one another for his own benefit.
They talk of democracy, freedom, fairness. Those are the creeds of cowards. The ones who will listen to 1,000 viewpoints and try to satisfy them all. Achievement comes through absolute power, and power through strength. They have lost!
Eventually, Davros forces the Doctor to divulge a massive history lesson on how the Daleks are defeated in the future. Priceless information that Davros can use to make his creations even more deadly and invincible than they already are. The Doctor may have made the Daleks even worse, accomplishing the exact opposite of his intended mission and dialing the story stakes up to 11. The scene between the Doctor and Davros after this interview is a show-stopping highlight, as the two diametrically opposed characters debate morality. The Doctor, now captured and already used as a tool by Davros in his grand design, makes one last attempt to reason with him. He suggests a hypothetical situation, asking what Davros would do if given the power to end all life in the universe other than himself, becoming the only remaining living being in existence. His response is truly chilling.
Yes, I would do it. That power would set me up above the gods. And through the Daleks, I shall have that power!
His worst fears confirmed, the Doctor makes one last bid to end the Daleks, getting a hold of Davros and threatening to cut off his life support if he doesn't order the Daleks to be destroyed. This scene shows just how desperate the normally torture-averse Doctor is, as he now knows what's at stake and just how irredeemably evil Davros is. Unfortunately, human worm Niter ends the scene, and Davros once again wriggles out of trouble. The Doctor doesn't want to commit genocide and destroy an entire intelligent race, even one as evil as the Daleks. Both from a moral standpoint and from understanding the perspective that altering the power balance of the universe in such a radical way could have far-reaching consequences outside of his ability to predict or comprehend. Unfortunately for the Doctor, Davros' repeated double crosses and underhanded conspiracies continually escalate the situation and raise the stakes, to the point where the Doctor is forced to wrestle with the only option he has left: genocide. This leads to one of the most famous and memorable scenes in Tom Baker's entire era, where he must confront an unwinnable situation with massive moral implications.
Just touch these two strands together, and the Daleks are finished. Have I that right?
To destroy the Daleks, you can't doubt it.
But I do.
This scene perfectly encapsulates and defines the Doctor's character to the core. He is a good person, a hero, who understands the moral implications of his actions with every fiber of his being. Despite his generally happy-go-lucky nature, the weight of responsibility rests heavy on his shoulders, being the oldest, wisest, and most knowledgeable person in the room on any given day. This scenario is his worst fear, being forced to commit evil in order to prevent even greater evil. Tom Baker's performance of this scene is pitch perfect, heightened and even Shakespearean, without falling into melodrama. Elizabeth Sladen as Sarah Jane plays the voice of the common man, aka us, trying to convince him to just kill these horrifically evil monsters already.
Listen, if someone who knew the future pointed out a child to you and told you that that child would grow up totally evil, to be a ruthless dictator who would destroy millions of lives, could you then kill that child?
We're talking about the Daleks, the most evil creatures ever invented. You must destroy them. You must complete your mission for the Time Lords.
Do I have the right?
A classic Doctor Who scene for the ages. This moral dilemma would be revisited in a big way in the modern era, specifically being used to build the backstory of the traumatized Ninth Doctor and the terrible decision he was forced to make in the Time War, then forced to confront once again in the finale of that series. Eventually, the Doctor and friends escape danger with the help of the friends they made along the way, and Davros completes his supposedly flawless coup, tricking and then murdering the last of his enemies with his Dalek pets. However, it appears that the Daleks have finally hit a level of self-awareness that spells doom for our nefarious scientist, as they rebel against him and begin murdering the few remaining Khalids loyal to Davros. Interestingly, while this is ostensibly a Dalek story, the iconic pepper pots appear relatively infrequently for the majority of the story, only rolling out for Davros' demonstrations on occasion for the first few episodes, before finally being unleashed on both the Thals and Khalids. They spend most of their time lurking in the shadows, apparently under the complete control of their master Davros. This makes the few times they do appear and mow down groups of people far more impactful. They also barely speak more than a few words until their very final scene in the story, when they break free of Davros' control to become the truly autonomous monsters we all know and love. In classic Dalek fashion, they delivered this gem of a zinger.
Have pity! Pity! I have no understanding of the word. It is not registered in my vocabulary bank. Exterminate!
And thus, the morally bereft villain is also ironically undone by the very same values he embedded in his creation's psyches. Creatures without pity, murdering their own pitiless creator. Supremely satisfying, poetic justice is served.
I am your creator! You must! You will obey me! We obey no one! We are the superior beings!
The Doctor leaves us with a slightly silly visual and some great words of wisdom.
You don't seem too disappointed. We failed, haven't we?
Failed? No, not really. You see, I know that although the Daleks will create havoc and destruction for millions of years, I know also that out of their evil must come something good.
Thus ends the all-time classic Genesis of the Daleks. This story is a true masterpiece in my opinion. It has a great moral message, excellent social commentary woven throughout, interesting philosophical and moral conundrums for our hero to wrestle with, great atmosphere, exciting and harrowing moments, cool side characters, the Doctor at the top of his game, tons of great lines and memorable quotes, and an all-time great villain. My only critiques are a bit of fluff in the middle section, and a few moments of slightly too convenient plot developments involving people being in the right place at the right time. But these are honestly such minor quibbles compared to how great the story is overall that I can't even ding the story for it. I give Genesis of the Daleks an A. And that's it! That's the end of the review. That is everything I have to say about it. Obviously, I like the story very much, and if you have not seen it, and you're new to Doctor Who, you're looking to get into the classic era, I highly recommend this one, or this season as a starting point. I think they could tell when they were doing this that this was something special, because it looks like they put a lot of love and effort into this story in particular. What's coming up next? Ooh, Revenge of the Cybermen is coming up next. Ooh, yay. That is an interesting one. It has a very, very notably odd soundtrack. This is also the finale of the season. It's the last episode. It's the last episode of the season, so we're almost done with this. But that's what's coming up next. And then after that, you know, I'll do a ranking video, because those are always fun. I'll rank all the stories of Tom Baker's first season. We'll see what comes in first, what comes in last. And I'm really enjoying doing these Tom Baker stories. So I know I said I was going to do Christopher Eccleston at some point, and I am. I'm going to dive into that. But I'm kind of feeling like I'm really on a roll here, and I'm really enjoying just like going through the classic Tom Baker era. So I think I'm just going to keep doing that for a while. Just try to get as many of his stories out, you know, on a week or bi-weekly basis or whatever as I can. And at some point I will dip into the modern era again. I'm also working on the history of Romana. That will be coming out at some point in the future. But yeah, that's everything I got to say. That is the end of the video. Thank you so much for joining me. Oh, and don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel, please. I would really appreciate that. I'm trying to get to 500 subscribers. I'm almost there. It is dancing. It is dancing around 497, 498, 497. Just got to get that over the 500 mark. And then, you know, who knows where we can go from there. Then I'll probably try to get 1,000, and then I'll, you know, try to get more, because I always want more, of course, for the channel. Because I want you all to enjoy what I have to say. But I'm rambling now, so let's cut this at this point. And I just got to say thank you so much for joining me on this. And until next time, Kay, signing out.